Hi Janeites, and welcome back to the What the Austen podcast. I am so excited for today's episode because I am joined by actress and writer Susannah Harker, who, like myself, many of you will know and love as Jane Bennet in the 1995 BBC adaptation of Pride and Prejudice. Nearly 30 years on, and Susannah is reimagining Jane's story and her own in a witty, moving, and what I can imagine is going to be a deeply relatable new comedy drama entitled Jane Bennet's Second Spring. Now, this project is very much in the budding stages, so it's an amazing opportunity for you as Jane Austen fans to get involved and help bring it to life. In the episode today, we're going to be talking about Susannah's journey from becoming Jane Bennet to navigating midlife, and how that was very much a story of resilience and reinvention, and how every woman deserves her second spring and the chance to tell her own story. Filming this episode, I very much felt my younger self with me, you know, the little girl who fell in love with Jane Austen through the 1995 adaptation of Pride and Prejudice, and I feel so blessed and so grateful that I had this opportunity, and I hope that energy shines through, and I really hope that you enjoy this episode. Hi Susannah.
Hello. Hi Izzy.
I'm so excited to do this. This feels very full circle for me because my intro into the world of Jane Austen was through my mum and through the 1995 Pride and Prejudice. When I was very little, when I was, around like 5 or so, I actually went to World Book Day dressed as Elizabeth Bennet. So my mum made me a little outfit and it was very cute, but
I was going to say, you don't look quite old enough to have been around in 1995, but you were more than a twinkle. You were actually physical. And you don't remember the actual show, but your mum does. She was watching it, was she?
Yeah. She watched it when it came out, and then I was born a few years later, but we had it on video in the 2-part, where it like opened up like a book and there was like both videos in, and it was just like a really special thing that we bonded over, and then my love of Jane Austen kind of cycled from that point on. What I'd love to know, what I ask all of my guests first, is what got you into Jane Austen originally?
Gosh, well, it's one of those things. I'm actually in the house, which is my grandmother's house, which hasn't changed, which has stayed in the family for a few generations. And it was in this very house that I first encountered Jane Austen, or Pride and Prejudice specifically, because my grandmother, who I was very close to, who lived in this house, would read it every time she felt a bit down. A bit like people now who have the 95 TV series to go to. I hear that over and over again. It really brings me joy to hear that. That people go to it for comfort and solace, so she was doing that all those years ago when I was a child. And I remember her clutching this book close to her as she walked through this room and seeing her and saying, "What are you reading?" And she told me, and she said, "This is Pride and Prejudice, Jane Austen." I must have been about 10, I think, maybe a bit older. And so that was my first experience of it. So I just knew it as something that was comforting and that people go to for reassurance from then on. So that was my first experience of it. And then my next experience of Austen, it was at school. It was Northanger Abbey, and I was a little bit too young. I think I was around 12 when I read Northanger Abbey, which I don't think is the right age to read Northanger Abbey, because there's a heavy sense of irony, I think, to it. It's that amazing Gothic atmosphere, and it's very funny and it's very witty. But I don't think I really understood that when I was 12. So I wasn't the biggest fan, because that was my actual introduction, and we all had to do that thing of sitting around and reading it out at a desk, which was also not
popcorn reading. That was my nightmare at school, popcorn reading.
So but I experienced the charm of it, but I didn't really get it then. And then what happened was, I was cast. I went up for it, and I read it for the first time, Pride and Prejudice, and I got to know it, and obviously I got it then. I'd read the script first, which was a strange way round to do it, and then I read the book, and I was absolutely thrilled by it, and that was my introduction. And Persuasion, and then I read them all, and Persuasion is my favourite. Remains my favourite, I think. So, and then my mother, it transpires that my mother, Polly Adams, was also in Pride and Prejudice in the 1976, I think. You may have to correct me on that version, which was the BBC series then, the early BBC series when the furniture was moving and things. But it's still pretty good. I mean, very much a drawing room version, which Andrew Davis is breaking out of, and he's going out into nature, and he's going wild with it in all sorts of ways. I'm sure you all know that anyway. And so, but Mum's was very much, and something happened, I can't remember, which was different. I should have done my homework before this, but I've got some amazing photographs of her doing it, in it, very sort of 70s looking. And I'm sure ours must look very 90s looking. But, it's funny how they go through these filters of their time, these stories, and yet they contain and maintain the atmosphere of Austen, So, yeah, that's those. And so, yes, I'm a my mum was before me playing Jane. She's upstairs. So I was slightly nervous of inheriting, having to do it, in hallowed shoes, because Mum's a wonderful actress. And I was slightly daunted by that, I think.
Such a wild, generational gift to have, that you both played the same character. That's honestly, I feel so divinely led. That's so strange.
I would agree. I absolutely. And so, both of us are Jane Bennet, or have been Jane Bennets. And then my son, I was pregnant when I was, as you know, filming, which was a bit of a shocker. And I was 4 months pregnant by the end of it. And that was quite uncomfortable, with all the hair being done and sitting in the makeup chair and all the ballroom scenes and not being able to lie down. And it was pretty uncomfortable for a lot of it. I was pretty uncomfortable. But anyway, that baby, Finley, my son, who is now 30, because it was 30 years ago, has also just directed, assistant directed Pride and Prejudice Almost, which is a fantastic touring show version of it, sort of improvised version. Brother-in-law was in Pride and Prejudice, married to my sister, Anthony Carve, and I can't remember what he played. Some sort of major or colonel or something. That's awful, isn't it? He's not going to be pleased that I haven't done my research for that. But anyway, yes, he was in it. So, and my father played Colonel Brandon. He's an actor, and he played Colonel Brandon in an adaptation in the 70s again, with Joanna David, who played Mrs. Gardner in our adaptation. So she played the lead in that, Sense and Sensibility. Sense and Sensibility. He was Colonel Brandon. So, and Joe David played the lead in that. And so anyway, yes, we've all had connections with the great Jane Austen over time, yeah.
I love that. That's so amazing. Yeah, it's like this web within your family with Austen all entangled, and I love that. I feel like that's so magical, and I feel like, in fact, even if it's on a smaller scale, that's the case for a lot of families. I think once one person gets into it, it becomes this kind of thing that's passed on, and you share it, and it becomes like this greater thing that you then bond over.
And how long have you been into it, Izzy? I'm sure everyone out there knows this already, but I'm curious. How did you?
Yeah, so I mean, when my mum showed me that, I was I must have been 5, I was very small. She used to watch it while she was ironing, so I would just be about and playing and what have you. And then when I was in high school, my parents went to see a live production of Pride and Prejudice at Lyme Park, which obviously you'll know well. They bought me my first copy then, which I still have. It's all tattered and such a mess. But yeah, they got me my first copy, and then I just read that, and that's the one that I stuck with for ages until I got to kind of sixth form age, and then I started to pick up the rest. And then at uni, I did my dissertation on Austen and things, and then when I left uni, I thought, that was it of my analysis of these things. It was just going to be this private love affair. And then had this intuitive nudge to start a podcast, which was totally random. And it's honestly changed my life. It's changed my confidence as a person. I've made the most incredible friends. I've had experiences that I never would have had otherwise. So it's been such a magical experience. And I owe so much of that to my love of Jane Austen. It's been incredible.
I think that is a very common experience and theme that I've got through the fan world and the people who I've met who really have got this love for her and connection to Austen, it's so connected to well-being and to health, actually. And I've found, many people I've met and spoken to feel that they've been brought back to wellness through reading her. It's very kind of nourishing, and yeah, and just it's people do seek Jane Austen as a refuge, and it does somehow. And I'm sure you know about the trenches and in the First World War, and that soldiers couldn't get enough of it, and they devoured all these Austen novels. Partly, I suppose, because it must have been so reminiscent of their home and of England. It's so English, the epitome of Englishness, isn't it? But also, I'm sure that is to do with that sort of earthedness somehow that she has, that sort of grounding ability in her stories, in her storytelling, that connects us to something very healthy, I think, and strong. And so I've known people who come out of periods of bleakness and depression through reading her, and going back to my grandmother, who would go back to read it to bring when she was in a bleak spot, that was her. And people now accessing the 95 series, for that very reason, to give people a sense of well-being and a lift and nurturing. It's so fantastic that,
I know, and even with like newer versions as well, like I think about the 2005 one, like what a connection so like a generation has had with that, and like how you see people, it's like this comfort watch for people too, and it is amazing how it doesn't really matter how you transform Austen, like what you create in relation to Austen, how it can be such a solace to people. Like even like some people have said to me, like with podcast episodes, like, oh, I listen to this while I'm gardening or I'm knitting or like I'm doing something like really homely and cozy, and I'm just like, I just think that's amazing. Yeah, there is something grounding about it. I think that's the perfect word for Austen, and so human.
Yes.
Yeah,
and I keep meeting that over and over again, because the human essence. I mean, she just tells those human stories, doesn't she? What is that quote? There's a quote about her writing. It's all about villages, isn't it? What happens inside a village. There's a very famous quote of hers.
What I'd love to hear about is, obviously, like you were saying about your experience being in the 95 adaptation, everything. When you were doing it and when you got cast as it, could you ever have anticipated what that would become? Because I just think that opened up a whole different world of Austen for people who never would have necessarily picked up her books. It really brought so many people into the world of Jane Austen.
Absolutely. I mean, the reach of it, across age and class and everything, it was astonishing. And that it didn't leave anyone out. It was so inclusive and it's so broad, and that's what it felt like. And people of all ages and all types, and were having the same experience, and that goes on. And no, absolutely not. I would never have anticipated that. I remember getting a train and someone, couldn't believe that Jane Bennet was actually on a train, first of all, but with my little boy, but also then saying, they just sort of almost shouting about it. They were so ecstatic about the way that it had, reached their family, and it was like a sort of mania. It was like a sort of proper. It felt like being in a rock band or something. It was very strange. I remember walking into a school and the mothers and everyone just sort of standing back and going, oh, and not being aware that it had that impact. I mean, I'd been in other things and they had been very successful. And I'd worked with, I did House of Cards with the writer, with the same writer, but Andrew, but it didn't have the same impact and effect that it had, and the reach that it had, so yeah.
That's so funny. I recently, I did a whole vlog on it, but I stayed in the teal rectory, like what you guys used for the Mr. Collins's house in your adaptation. I stayed there because it's a B&B and she was about to close it, so I was like, I want to go, I want to stay. And she has the most beautiful book of all these photos that she took when the filming was going on and everything. And I don't know, there was something about looking at those photos, even though it was just like a small segment of the series. I was like, wow, it just looks like such a amazing group of people just like coming together to experience this.
It was an extraordinary, those summer days, I do remember, and I have a photograph actually of, and I can't remember where we shot the Bennett's house, you probably know better than me, but there was the most extraordinary sort of hazy summer light everywhere. You know, it was a sort of bucolic haze of light and golden. It was a golden summer. And that really did kind of lend itself to the sort of golden atmosphere, really, of the series. And people do talk about that, the way that it looks. And I mean, some people criticize that and think it's a bit chocolate boxy. But I don't, you know.
I've never felt that way. I love it.
But I do have a photograph of the most amazing light coming through the window at that time. It's in black and white actually, but I keep it in my room, and it's in the doorway of the house of the Bennett household. And I just remember this extraordinary light pouring through the top of the doorway, the window above the doorway, and I can't remember what they're called. They're sort of semi-arch thing. And I keep that with me at all times. Because there was something very, very, very special about that light, and I noticed it at the time, and I've kept it with me ever since. That photograph, strange, isn't it?
You knew you were creating magic. That's why.
So I think because I was creating my son as well, and I think it was connected to that. You know, that it was a magical time. Yeah.
I love that. No, that's amazing. As well, just like playing the character of Jane Bennet, I did a whole character study actually on Jane. In how I framed it initially was kind of looking at, you know, whether Jane Bennet fell into the category of being like the ingenue, looking at kind of earlier of like 18th century writers and how they depicted kind of the damsel in distress, the heroine in their books, kind of contemporaries and people who came before Jane Austen, people that she would have read. But then when I did this whole character study, it was so amazing because my thoughts on Jane as a person completely changed, and I just saw how resilient, steadfast, and how strong she was as a character. One of my favourite Jane quotes is when it says something like, Jane was firm where she felt herself to be right. And I feel like that line really encapsulates who Jane is. I feel like it's the perfect way to capture Jane Bennet. So like my question is just like, what was it like to portray Jane Bennet? Because I feel like she does have this balance of kind of this softness, but also this strength that I think, you know, is something to balance.
Well, I think, you know, I got all the inspiration really for her, or the ideas for her, how to play her, and from Cassandra, because she's based on Cassandra, Jane's sister. So I read up and read around Cassandra really, and she very much applies those qualities to Cassandra always. And it is that incredible sense of integrity really, and purity of thought, integrity of thought, and that runs through Jane, but also through all her books, you know, and in a way that Jane Bennet sort of encapsulates that. I mean, you get wickedness as well, you know, which is celebrated, and a sort of playfulness of mind. But she does always come back to, there he goes, that's Baxter, who's in the film. But she does always come back to a sort of deep inner sense of integrity, I think.
It'd be good to talk about how your life progressed from what was like the Austenmania of the 95 adaptation, and then what you went to do then, and then how you progressed into wanting to write.
Well, I mean, I did all sorts of different bits and pieces after Jane, but and I did a series called Ultraviolet, and I did lots of different work, and got away from the sort of the Jane, you know, and into other areas, sci-fi, and, you know, it was interesting. And then around when I got a bit older, you know, it tails off and you don't get the kind of parts. And, you know, I was thinking, I'm not sure I feel great about playing these parts. And so I thought about, I have written before and I hadn't written for a while. And there was one particular aspect of acting that I wanted to write about and address, which is to do with visibility and midlife as well, which is what I'm addressing and looking at. And I did write about someone else altogether, actually, a friend of mine who's a photographer, but it didn't really work. And then I thought, well, reluctantly at first, I think I need to use the fact that I was so highly visible in a particular role at a particular time in my life, and use that to highlight and as a metaphor, for visibility now, which all sounds very serious, but it's not. It's very funny. It's a comedy. It's a kind of comedy drama, which stars my dog Baxter, who's here making a lot of noise, and also stars the series, and fans of the series, some of whom I know really well. So I can't really talk much more about it other than to say that it's going to be, if you're interested in Austen, then it's going to be, I think, something nice for you to look at.
And that is okay. We can talk around the topic. Something that I loved that came up on your Kickstarter page is like a little bit that you wrote and about like this piece that you were creating. And it said, this is a letter to the woman I became when no one was watching. It's about finding my feet through the midlife mists of invisibility to an open place of true, unapologetic self and freedom. It's about owning all our stories, not just the ones we want to tell. Jane Bennet deserved her second spring, and so do we all. Sorry to quote yourself back to yourself, but there was something in there that I was just like, this is so true. What I loved most is that bit where you were saying it's about owning all our stories, not just the ones we want to tell. And I feel like there's something in what you've just said there that you were kind of reluctant for it to be more about you and for you to be on display again, but how actually that was the right choice.
Yes, I was very reluctant, and in sort of Jane Bennet way, I'm not someone who enjoys a lot of exposure or talking about myself at all. I'm quite shy, really, and many actors are very shy, because you're kind of hiding behind, you're accessing other people in order to communicate and character, I believe, and that's where I'm most comfortable when I'm talking through characters. So to actually put the spotlight on myself and my own life to a degree was really uncomfortable, but I kind of knew the value of that, and that I had to get past that and through that in order to express what I want to express about women in particular, and about midlife and what I went through, and to provide we don't have a roadmap for the next bit as we get older. And the way that we are reflected back in today's society is not how we are. We're evolving, we're changing, I think, very much. I mean, people are living longer. And we don't, the parts I was suddenly getting was sort of Mrs. Thatcher, which is a great part, but, it didn't reflect who I am, didn't reflect my actual. And I thought I'm never offered anything that reflects how the majority of women my age are now. There just seems to be a great void there, and it is part of the conversation. People are talking about it, but it needs to go further. And so that's what we have, a team of women on this, mostly of a particular age, and that's what we're addressing and we're looking at, and through as clear a lens as possible, the experience of what it's like, to be this age and to be in a changing moment, I think, and that hasn't been reflected back to us yet in the media and in the work that we have around us.
Something that I'd love to touch on, something that I think, the fact that you were talking about kind of being offered these more kind of like matron-y type roles as you were getting older and things. I love the archetypal frame of like the maiden mother crow, and how that structure shows us the understanding of like the cycles of womanhood. But I feel like a lot of the time it doesn't go far enough into kind of how complex and multifaceted women often are.
And how we contain all of those things at once, actually, at every age. And there should be a much more expansive experience, and we should be allowed to be bigger than we are, than we are pigeonholed or thought of as being. And I think that is being part of the conversation. People are becoming aware of it. And this pushes that and explores that through my own personal experience of it. which felt very uncomfortable at first, but I'm beginning to attune to realize that it was the way to go, because with that comes a true experience and an authenticity that people, are more ready to listen to, I think, and to be open to. Yeah.
No, I love that. I think it's so true. I feel like there's that Virginia Woolf quote that says, Jane Austen's one of the hardest people to capture in the act of greatness, because it's like, that she's incredible, but it's so difficult to capture that essence of that. And I feel like there's something about capturing women in the same way that's often quite difficult. It's like women are so complex. Like when I think about the women in my life, like these women are incredible, but they are all things. It also makes me think about my recent experience reading Flowers in the Attic by Virginia Andrews. It's an amazing series, very, very bizarre and odd in many ways, very gothic. But the main protagonist, Kathy, she is not a Mary Sue at all. Like, she is very complicated. Like, a lot of her drivers in life is like revenge, but she's also ambitious and creative and this loving sister and like mother figure in the book as well. Like, she's all of these things packed in. And when I was reading it, like, it was such a incredible experience, because I was like, this woman is not perfect, and yet she feels so much more real to me than a lot of other women I sometimes experience in books or film nowadays, where it's like they don't seem to have the roundedness that I know exists in the women in my own life.
And I think even coming back to Jane Bennet with that, even in the portrayal of the Jane Bennet ideal character, which is that she's placid, that she's serene, but as you identified, there is to her a depth and that sort of determination and that strength which runs through her, which I know is true of Cassandra as well. And there's more complexity to that common perception of woman, and of femaleness. And of course, she's brilliant, Jane, at writing pictures of perfection make me sick and wicked, which is a quote from her, that she's brilliant at through wicked humour and, waspishness or whatever. And, she explores the full reach of being female, I think, in a society, in a time where you weren't able to express really your full self. We have much more freedom now, I think. Because they had to get married and they were only recognised. And she writes to all those points. She's an incredible feminist writer, actually. So, yeah, she's a wonderful lens to look at what I'm trying to write through, which is sort of what I'm doing, is using Jane Austen herself. Jane Austen visits my character, the protagonist in this story, and gives her some advice.
Yeah, I feel like also as well, like I feel like the struggles that often I think women as we get older face. I mean, in general, like if I open it up, what's really interesting to me is like when you're younger and like when you, like for instance, when you start your period or what have you, that's like this momentous thing that then you have to live with for such a long period of time. And then obviously if you have a child, like going through pregnancy, like you're saying when you were recording the 95 one, how uncomfortable you were at times because you were going through that. And then later in life, when we hit menopause, there's so many stages that I feel like these are often things that are kind of still in some ways considered taboo, or like things that we shouldn't celebrate.
These transitional stages that sort of give us our identity, and we are more than that. We are more than our periods or our menopause or our pregnancies. But
there's also something about embracing those as well, right? That it's like these aren't these secretive things we need to pretend like don't happen to us.
Yes, sorry, yeah, that's true. Exactly. No, an openness about it. Yes, but it's not all about that. It isn't. There's more, and that's and what's beyond that, because after the menopause, it feels like we're traditionally told, or given the feeling that is the final hurdle for us. It's all over after that. It's all downhill, or you're going into old age and you're disappearing, or you're going to be a granny, maybe, if you're lucky, and you're going to disappear. And that isn't true. And it's certainly not true of modern women. It's never been true of women, I think. But right now, that needs to be looked at in a very different way, I think. We have a long stretch of time ahead of us, and to be kind of abandoned after the menopause to the desert of nothingness doesn't feel right, because there is an awful lot that we have to explore and to give and to, we're still fertile in different ways, there's a rich fertility there in the imagination and in experience and in curiosity. Many women continue to be curious and to travel and to start over again. But there's a fantastic sense, there's a sort of exodus really at that time of life, usually, often for many women. And that I certainly experienced that, when the kids grow up, they go, you lose your fertility, you lose your body to a degree, there's this mass. Parents die around that age. My father died, animals died, beloved kind of family animals die. There's this incredible exodus around sort of late midlife, and the menopause, including the menopause. And then you're sort of, in my case, having like hallucinative experiences, and which were my hormones going crazy, and it was just the most intense time of loss, I suppose. And I didn't feel that there was anything the other side of that to encourage me into looking ahead, looking forward into the next phase of my life. I thought it's all over. I'm never going to act again. I'm never going to get the kind of parts I want to get again, or the parts that reflect me. And I had to go on a real journey, and I did. And part of that journey was with the Austen community, because I was doing lots of things attached and connected to the P&P 95, and I had friends who were working in that community, and talking to them. And I was writing a play with my sister about it, which we were putting on stage, and then lockdown happened, and we decided to go and make it into a film, and then it's had a journey since then to this point. And then it kind of married with another project that I was writing about the menopause, which was a psychological thriller about someone else altogether. And they both came together, these two different stories. One was the Austen focused and the other one was the menopause focused. And actually they really lent themselves to each other. And this story then just almost wrote itself. It's that thing of it fell out and felt as if it was meant to have been written. And so we have an amazing team behind it. And a good flow. We're doing a Kickstarter, we're doing a campaign just for an initial, development campaign and to bring awareness to it, which has been going really well. We hadn't been doing it for very long and not posting much really on it, hadn't really focused on it, and it's done really well.
No, I love this. I love this idea of this group of women coming together to do something creative. In something that you said that I thought was amazing about saying, you have this kind of like fertility or this creation. Sometimes it's not just life, it's other things. And I've had this conversation a few times on the podcast where it's like, I think one of the most amazing things as a woman is this ability to create, that sometimes it just flows out of you. And that can be in different forms, right? And sometimes it is in writing or something that's like video form or what have you. And I think it's something so lovely about you saying like you can hit this certain stage of life and actually you realize there's so much still that you can make, create, live for, nurture. Yes. It doesn't just end like that's it, I've had my children, that's the end of it. There's so much more beyond that.
So many women, it is a terrible sense of loss and emptiness and an end of everything, an end of fertility. And we're not given enough support and guidance to say, yes, there is more and it is still fertile. There's a different kind of fertility waiting for you, which is to do with the imagination and curiosity and exploring life and the freedom actually that later life gives you, if you bring the right thoughts to it and the right attitude to it, but you've got to get there. We have to go through a bit of it's almost like the menopause is a bit of a portal, sounding a bit sci-fi now. So to do
no, it's true.
That's very much what our story is about going through a real sense of loss and ending, and then seeing what there is to offer. And Austen, the world of Austen, is what helped me to get there and was so rewarding and so fulfilling and so sort of, going back to the mental health thing, so sort of nourishing and grounding. And the people that I was working with there met there, and going back into the Austen world was something that really got me through. And that is what I've written about. That's what is in the story. But it's funny. It's funny as well. I'm making it sound as though it's very gloomy, but it's really not gloomy. There are some comments. I mean, Jane Austen does come along, is in it. Let's just say that she makes an appearance and gives lots of typical Austen advice to help Susie, the character of Susie, get through this particular sticky patch in her life.
I think that's the perfect combination. Again, it was like we're saying, like, women are so multifaceted. They have so many parts that make up who they are. Like, and that's the same with this, what you're creating, right? It's not just one thing. It can be both touch into, like, you know, the grief and like the sorrow in life, but also it can be funny and lighthearted, and also just like show the beauty that it is actually to grow older. I feel like sometimes it's difficult to remember that, especially like for me, like, you know, I'm in my 20s now, but even the fear that like things like the beauty industry push about this idea of like aging and it being like this terrifying thing that like, oh my goodness, like we need to prevent this happening.
I know, we're not allowed to age. That needs to be readdressed. It really does. Apparently someone told me Madonna had said that the other day, of all people. But we're not allowed. Age is not accepted. Women, for women to age is not accepted, and that's really important to address that, I think, and to be able to do it naturally, and not be kind of, you know, cougars or kind of, you know, dressed up and put together and pumped full of, you know, lifts, fillers and things. You don't have to do that. People can do it if they want to. It's up to them. It's, you know, fine.
It's choice, right? It's choice. Yeah. I feel like that's some, like, the main message for me. Like, that's the
progression, if possible, that is more accepted widely and is allowed and still seem to be relevant, you know, present, attractive, you know, and recognised for that. You know, we need that, I think. What else was I going to say? Yes, I mean, I think also why Austen is so useful to work alongside this theme is that, you know, when she was considered, you know, lost past the bloom of youth, as they say in Persuasion, you know, 30, that was it was over. So Austen herself and Cassandra were both considered to be sort of spinsters. So I see them as being, you know, that whole thing of going to Bath, to the balls at Bath, the dances at Bath, and having to sit, and she talks about the humiliation of having to sit in the second or third row back, depending on how old you were, you know, the wallflower thing and that sort of. So I think that I feel that she really resonates as well with as sort of getting a more mature woman, you know, getting into maturity, that she understands that thing of stepping away from being the center and at the center, because she deliberately did, you know, and she and Cassandra made that choice, which was very powerful and unusual at that time, to step away from being in the marriage scene and all of that, which she obviously found distasteful, I think. So she was claiming her power and her independence as a woman in a time when people didn't. It's fantastic. So using her as a lens to see what I'm trying to write through was very potent. It really worked, you know, it really helped. And the kind of advice that Jane turns up to give to Susie, you know, you can it feels right. It feels like, you know, you do turn. She has the sort of wisdom of a mature woman, of an older woman who's on her own, if you like, you know, to a degree.
Yeah, and something that I loved as well, that when I was reading about on the Kickstarter website as well, is that when you guys were talking about wanting to create, you know, original stories with, you know, real voices, like original voices in it as well. And I definitely feel that coming through this project that you're creating. And I think because you have got this community of women who are coming together to build this, you're all bringing your own lived experiences. And I feel like there's going to be something about when this comes out that it will give a kind of platform and a voice to a lot of women who are going through the same things. And struggling to navigate it. Like, I know for like women in my own life, like I think about my mum, like such a crazy time for her. Like, you know what I mean? Like starting to go through the menopause, like it feels, like you said, quite chaotic. But then at the same time, I don't think she's ever been as creative she is now. It's almost like it just comes out of her. So I just think there is something about giving that space and platform. Like you said, like it's not always about the cougars or about, you know, the downtrodden woman who's got like nothing left to give. Like there's something about giving a platform to the woman who's in her second bloom, like she's coming back up, you know what I mean?
There is
She's,
a freedom
you know,
there.
it's this
There
second
is a
spring.
freedom there. It's just how to experience that freedom, you know, and not to be afraid of it, because we're not given enough tools to really celebrate the freedom that we're offered often as women, because we have apologized a lot, you know, or kept quiet, or kind of, you know, that's inbuilt into us, I think. And I'm exploring that. And Jane Bennet is very much an example of the good girl, if you like. And I want to look at that and people who feel that they have to have been good, and the pressure of that, really. And that's changing, and we are allowed to talk out and talk up, and, you know, and to express ourselves, you know, more freely, I think.
Yeah, something that I was thinking about when I was looking at that kind of part of the project as well is how I think a lot of that comes from fear because of what we're exposed to. Like, I feel like we see in society the women who fly too close to the sun, they get burnt quickly. We witness it, and I feel like it makes us kind of retreat into ourselves, that we're like, oh, like I don't want that to happen to me. That woman was outspoken, that woman was more like complicated, people saw it, and then suddenly the attack that happens often on these women, I think it's such a deterrent for others.
Absolutely. I think that is shifting. I mean, I think your generation and the younger generation are much more outspoken, naturally more outspoken, and have opinions. And I think that's being encouraged more, which is great. I think that when you get to midlife, it's going to be a different story. But, you know, it's up to us to make sure that is the case, you know, and that's what I'm trying to do, is to ease that journey a little bit for us and for you lot coming through, you know, because it's not easy, and you don't know that until you get there, and you realize that so many people are having a similar experience, and it's not expressed in a real way, in a way that's understood, and I'm trying to do it, you know, in a humorous way, but to ease that pathway through to maturity, the later years. You know.
No, I love it. I think it's such an important topic. And I love as well that this is a community project that you're doing. People can get involved in so many ways to help build this. So you have on that Kickstarter page, you have lots of different options how people can like contribute and be involved as like extras. You have a lot of different things that you're offering, right?
We do. Yes, we do have lots of kind of get involved, you know, definitely. And there's a wonderful embroidery kit maker who we're going to put her stuff up next time. So we're going to come back with some really interesting, different rewards. So yeah, just watch this space. But you're right, people can turn up or join in, or they can talk to us, you know, and things like that. Yeah,
I think it's such a special project, and I think it's just going to be, I think it's going to be really amazing. I think it's definitely needed, and I think it's fitting. And like you were saying, like, you know, I do think my generation can be more outspoken, but I feel like we're also tackling our own struggles in terms of, you know, social media. It's quite easy to be attacked on social media. So I feel like we have maybe different forms of exposure that if we are outspoken more often, we can still be condemned in quite harsh ways. So I feel like it is bridging that gap.
Yes, absolutely. No, you have that whole burden of the social media thing, which I'm about to go into because I'm trying to do a Kickstarter campaign, and I can't believe that I'm now all this exposure on social media is a little bit daunting and nerve-wracking. And I know you guys, you know, you live with that. You live with a certain level of that. And it's not something that I particularly want to go into. And I can understand that is something that needs to be navigated and talked about and understood in order to get to a place, I think, where it's safer and more comfortable for everyone, you know, and I don't know what that journey is, but it does need to be made.
I think for me, what I found personally is just like leaning into like women connections in my life. people who are in all different stages, because I feel like I can learn so much from them and take so much from them that it's honestly really transformed the way that I go through life now that I've got like women mentors and things. And I wrote an article actually about for the Jane Austen Literary Foundation about how Mrs. Garden is kind of this wise woman, like literary mentor to Elizabeth Bennet. And Mrs. Garden is like one of my favourite characters. Like I love her because I feel like she comes in and she has all that stuff to show Elizabeth and teach her, and she does it in such a wonderful, mature way that I'm just like, I love those kind of characters too, like the wise woman.
And Jane Austen did have fantastic friendships with older women. What was her name? Anne Lefroy, or you will know.
Anne Lefroy, yeah.
Who was her great friend and kind of mentor, who was killed when she fell from a horse, right? And which was very shocking and it certainly informed Jane, I think, you know, that shot one of the things in her life that was very shocking for her. But she had special, and Martha Lloyd, was it Martha Lloyd? Martha Lloyd, yeah. These were great older women friends, you know, who she learnt and was nourished by, you know.
And one of the Knight family members, I think, was like one of her benefactors. Like she was the person who put the money up so that Jane could like send her work to like publishers and stuff. So there was just like so many women in Jane's life who were like, we believe in you, like we know that you can do this. Yeah,
absolutely. But the other thing I'd like to say about going into this community, which is the Austen-based community, is that everyone I know who is involved with this world and the fan community always say how this, of all platforms or all, you know, social media places, is so wonderful. The people are so wonderful. It's so nourishing. You're nice. You're not going to get many trolls and kind of vicious attacks on this. It's very different to the sci-fi world and to kind of, you know, so at least I feel safe and comfortable, you know.
Yeah, no.
I've chosen nice people.
No, 100%, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I've not had bad experiences. Sometimes I actually think I live in a bit of a bubble, and sometimes when I see what other people I know or friends are like experiencing who share different things. In fact, I actually think it's become, I was speaking to another friend, a writer earlier this week we were talking about how sometimes we lean into certain content because it's our comfort zone. And I said to her, in many ways, like Jane Austen's become that for me. She's my comfort zone now because I feel so safe here. And there's so many other things that I want to talk about, but I find that feels like the challenge now. When I started this, it was the challenge to just talk about anything. But then as time's passed, like Jane's become such a crutch for me. She is my comfort zone. And, you know, it's taking that leap now to be able to speak about other things and have the bravery to do that. And that's how amazing this community is.
Yeah.
This community is that amazing that I'm like, this is my crutch.
Yes, and you come back to it, you feel safe. And I do feel safe here, and that's what she does provide, going back again to that sense of kind of connecting with a kind of healthy way of thinking and being, you know, which is, or a comforting, grounded way of being.
Absolutely.
You know. So we're lucky.
Yeah.
We're lucky.
Yeah, thank you so much, Susannah. Is there anything else that you want to mention about the project or anything else that you want to bring in?
I can't think our campaign page, but do go on there. We're on Kickstarter, Jane Bennet Second Spring. So lovely to meet
That would be awesome. Yeah, you too. Thank you so much for coming on. Honestly, it's such a magical experience for me even getting to do this with you. So I really appreciate it. Honestly, my mum's going to die when I tell her. She's actually on holiday at the moment. Otherwise, I'd be like, Mum, quick, come in. But she's on holiday at the moment. But yeah, she's going to be so excited that I got to do this. Thank you so much, Susannah. I'll leave all of the links below this so you can find out what is going on with Susannah's project, and you can connect with anyone else in the team as well, because there's a really amazing group of people coming together to put this project together. So I will add all of the links below. But that is everything from me today, and I will see you in another episode.